So, someone's coming back, Funny how life works. You think a chapter is closed, sealed, buried under time. But then, out of nowhere, the air shifts. A whisper crawls up your spine. A familiar echo taps on the door of your memory. And suddenly the past doesn't feel so distant anymore. There's a message lingering in the atmosphere, something that tells you this return isn't an accident, not a coincidence, not some random twist of fate. No, this is deliberate. This is timed. This is orchestrated with a precision that makes you wonder if you ever had control in the first place. Their return is part of a story that was never truly finished. You know how people love to pretend that certain chapters are closed, wrapped up neatly with a bow, tossed into the back of the mind like some forgotten old book. But stories, real stories, don't behave that way. They linger. They wait. They hang in the air like unfinished sentences, suspended between what was said and what was meant. And when a story still has something left to reveal, it doesn't matter how far you run, how deeply you bury it, or how loudly you insist it's over. It finds its way back. It always does. Funny, isn't it? How the universe plays with timing. How someone you thought you were done with, someone you convinced yourself had exited your life permanently, begins to creep back into your thoughts before they even return. A random memory flickers. A familiar feeling stirs. A name echoes in your mind for no logical reason. These things don't happen without a purpose. They're signals, hints, little nudges reminding you that certain people are woven too deeply into your story to be erased by time or distance. And if you pay attention, really pay attention, you'll notice there were signs all along, conversations that felt incomplete, emotions that never settled, questions that never found their answers. These loose ends don't just vanish. They pull at you, subtly, quietly, persistently. You might try to ignore them, laugh them off, push them aside. But the truth is, something inside you always knew this wasn't over. Something inside you felt the tension, the weight, the unfinished energy still humming beneath the surface. See, when a story still has chapters left, life bends itself to make them happen. Coincidences start stacking in strange little patterns. You cross paths with reminders of them. You dream about things you never fully processed. You catch yourself replaying the past, wondering what would have happened if things had gone differently. And just when you start to think you're imagining it all, the universe shifts again subtly, sharply, unmistakably preparing the stage for their return. Now, don't misunderstand. This isn't some warm, fuzzy reunion fantasy. No, this is deeper, sharper, more precise than that. When someone returns because the story isn't finished, it means something needs to happen, something big, something revealing, something that changes the trajectory of everything that comes after. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's truth. Maybe it's healing. Or maybe it's something more unpredictable. Something that rewrites everything you thought you understood. You see, unfinished stories are messy. They carry tension. They carry unresolved emotions. They carry truths that were too heavy to face back then. And when a person comes back, that unresolved weight comes with them. Not to punish you, but to bring the story to where it was always meant to go. Their return isn't random. It's part of a design bigger than your expectations, bigger than your assumptions, bigger than your careful attempts to move on without asking the questions that scared you. Some stories need to break you open before they can set you free. Some need to return before they can end properly. And some return not to end, but to begin again in a way you never imagined possible. That's the thing about unfinished stories. They don't behave the way you think they will. They twist, they shift, they surprise you. And this person's return, it's one of those twists, The kind that makes the entire plot suddenly make sense in a way it never did before. So here you are, sensing it, feeling it, knowing something is moving toward you. You can pretend you don't feel it, pretend you're unbothered, pretend it doesn't matter, but deep down, in the space where intuition whispers truths, your mind refuses to say out loud, you know this isn't over. You feel the pull, you feel the shift, you feel the story stirring again. Distance has changed both of you in ways that matter now. Time has this strange, almost mischievous way of reshaping people when they're not looking. You think you're just surviving, moving through your days, doing what needs to be done. But all the while, something inside you is shifting. And the same thing happens to the person who walked away, or the one you let go, or the one who drifted out of your orbit. Distance isn't just space, it's a factory, constantly working, constantly altering, constantly refining what leaves and what returns. People come back different, and so do you. It's easy to assume that the version of them you remember is the version that still exists, the one who disappointed you, or confused you, or hurt you, or made you question your worth. But that version is gone. Time devours old versions of people, and distance forces them to confront pieces of themselves they once ignored. When someone is away from you, truly away, they face their own silence, their own regrets, their own reflection without distraction. That silence shapes them, sharpens them, humbles them. They learn things they couldn't learn when they were tangled in the mess of emotion, misunderstanding, or timing. And you don't pretend you're the same either. Distance didn't leave you untouched. You've grown in the cracks. You've hardened where you needed strength, softened where you needed compassion. You've learned how to stand alone, how to carry your own weight, how to breathe without relying on someone else's presence. You've shed the emotional skin that once made you fragile, insecure, uncertain. The version of you they once knew is gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, more aware. That matters. That changes the entire equation. That's why this return feels different. Because you aren't the person they left behind, and they aren't the person who walked away. The story is shifting because the characters have evolved. The timing that once failed you is finally aligning, not because the universe decided to be kinder, but because both of you have earned the right conditions through growth you didn't even realize was happening. Distance breaks illusions. It exposes what was real and what was imagined. It shows you what you truly missed, what you never needed, and what you misunderstood. It forces clarity where confusion once thrived. And for them, oh, you'd be surprised how much clarity distance has forced upon them. They see things they were blind to before. They feel things they numbed. They understand things they once ignored because they didn't know how to process them. People don't come back out of boredom, they come back out of realization. But here's the haunting part. Distance doesn't just change feelings, it changes expectations. The version of you they remember, that version no longer exists. And when they return, they're going to feel it immediately, the shift in your tone, your boundaries, your confidence, your energy. You aren't waiting. You aren't begging. You aren't desperate. You've grown into a version of yourself that stands tall without needing anyone to hold you up. And that growth, that unshakable evolution, pulls them back in more powerfully than anything else ever could. You'll notice the difference in them too. The hesitation replaced with sincerity, the confusion replaced with conviction, the immaturity replaced with understanding. They had to step away to see what they couldn't see while standing too close. You had to lose them to find yourself. They had to lose you to recognize your value. And now, both of you stand on the edge of something new, something rebuilt, something informed by distance rather than damaged by it. So when this person comes back, and they will, don't expect the past to walk through your door. Expect someone shaped by time, humbled by space, awakened by realization. Expect a version of them that sees you clearly for the first time. And expect a version of yourself that no longer shrinks to fit the story that once broke you. Pain has a way of teaching lessons no gentle voice could ever explain. It cracks you open, strips away the illusions you cling to, and forces you to face the raw truth beneath everything you thought you understood. People like to pretend pain is some mistake, some cruel interruption to life's plan, but you and I both know better. Pain is deliberate. Pain is precise. Pain arrives exactly when it's meant to, dragging you by the collar into the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. And if you're brave enough to sit with it instead of running, pain becomes the tutor that transforms you. Funny, isn't it? You spend so much time trying to avoid discomfort, yet the very thing you fear is the thing that shapes you. It sharpens your perception, deepens your understanding, forces you to acknowledge what you've been too afraid to admit. Pain looks you dead in the eye and whispers truths you've ignored for years, about the people you trusted, about the weaknesses you hid, about the strength you didn't know you had. But here's the part most people miss. Pain doesn't just enter your life, it rearranges it. It takes your routines, your relationships, your beliefs, and pulls them apart like threads from a worn-out costume. And as you watch everything fall apart, you finally see what was real and what was nothing more than a pretty lie you dressed up as security. Pain doesn't destroy you. It destroys the version of you that was too small for the life you're meant to grow into. Think about the moments that broke you. Not the superficial hurts, but the deep ones, the betrayals, the losses, the disappointments that felt like they hollowed you out. Those moments created a fracture inside you, a split between who you were and who you would eventually become. You didn't know it at the time, but that crack was the doorway. That was the entrance to the next version of yourself. Pain wasn't pushing you down. It was pushing you through. And isn't it interesting how pain changes your vision? Things you used to accept become intolerable. People you once begged for suddenly feel small. Places you once felt stuck in no longer hold the same weight. Pain wakes you up. It peels off the blindfold people wrapped around your eyes with sweet words and broken promises. It forces you to see what's been right in front of you, hidden beneath your desire to keep the peace or avoid confrontation. You begin to grow in ways you didn't even intend. You stop chasing approval. You stop shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable. You stop tolerating disrespect disguised as love. Pain gives you boundaries, sharp, unshakable boundaries that no one gets to cross without consequence. And those boundaries aren't built out of bitterness. They're built out of understanding. You finally understand your worth, your time, your heart, your limits. Pain taught you that. And maybe the most twisted part of all is how pain eventually becomes gratitude. Not at first, oh no. At first it feels like an attack, like the universe decided to pull the floor out from under you just to watch you fall. But over time, as you rise, as you rebuild, as you see the new strength in your reflection, you begin to whisper a quiet thank you. Because without the storm, you'd still be praying for sunlight that wasn't meant for you. Without the heartbreak, you'd still be holding on to someone who didn't deserve the softness of your soul. Without the disappointment, you'd still be waiting for validation from people who couldn't recognize your value, even if it was carved in stone. Pain shapes you by breaking you. It molds you by moving through you like a fire that burns away everything that isn't authentic. And once it's done, once the ashes settle, you find yourself standing in a life you barely recognize, a life that fits you better than anything you clung to before. A life where you're stronger, clearer, wiser. A life where you finally understand why everything had to unfold exactly the way it did. Chaos has a funny way of slipping into your life without knocking, without warning, without the courtesy of letting you prepare. One day everything seems steady, predictable, boring even, and then, suddenly, the ground under your feet starts to tremble. People change their tone. Situations twist into unfamiliar shapes. The world shifts just enough to make you wonder if you've been sleepwalking this whole time. And that's the moment, that exact unsettling moment, when you realize something is happening behind the curtains. Something you weren't meant to see. Something they hoped you'd never notice. But you did. You felt the shift in the air. The glances that lingered too long, the whispers that stopped the moment you walked into the room, the strange silence that tasted like secrets. That's when you begin to understand that life isn't always as straightforward as you pretend. People don't always speak the truth. They act, perform, strategize, hide. And while you were busy living honestly, thinking everyone around you was doing the same, they were busy plotting, planning, deciding what version of you they preferred to keep contained. You weren't supposed to find out. You weren't supposed to sense the tension. You weren't supposed to feel the pull of energies shifting in the shadows. But you did. And now that you've noticed, you can't unnotice. Something in you wakes up, like a flicker of electricity along your spine. Your senses sharpen. Your instincts rise. You start paying attention in a way you never have before. Suddenly, every word matters. Every look matters. Every pattern matters. You begin to see the pieces moving on the board. You begin to understand that not everyone in your story is a friend of your victory. And that's the part they forget. You're not as blind as they assume. They think you're predictable. They think you're naive. They think you're comfortable enough to never question what's happening around you. They mistake your kindness for weakness, your silence for ignorance, your patience for permission. And oh, how wrong they are. Because once suspicion sparks inside you, once your intuition starts whispering louder than their lies, once you sense the truth vibrating beneath their polished smiles, you transform. You become alert. You become aware. You become dangerous in a way they never prepared for. You start seeing the motives behind their actions, the reasons behind their sudden friendliness, the meaning behind their sudden distance. You understand that everyone has an agenda, and some agendas have your name circled in red. And there is a strange satisfaction in that moment when you finally accept that not every hand extended toward you is offering help. Some are just reaching to pull something out of your pockets, or out of your heart, or out of your path. But here's the twist they never consider. The more they hide from you, the more they reveal. People who plot always leave traces. A tone in their voice, a change in their routine, a sudden interest in your affairs, a sudden concern they didn't have before. They slip up, because secrecy is a heavy mask to wear. And you, with that sharp mind of yours, start connecting dots they didn't think you'd even notice. Chaos doesn't confuse you anymore, it clarifies. It forces you to sit with the question, why are they moving like this? Why now? Why you? And once you ask the right questions, the answers start crawling out of the shadows. You realize how many people underestimated you, how many tried to shape your narrative, how many quietly hoped you'd stay in the box they built for you. But life has this beautiful, twisted way of revealing truths right when you're strong enough to handle them. You stop reacting with fear. You start observing with curiosity. You lean back. You watch. You decode. You learn to move smarter, softer, quieter. You realize that you don't need to confront every scheme. You just need to outgrow it, outsmart it, outrise it. And you begin to play a different game. A game where your awareness becomes your armor. A game where you don't flinch at shadows because you're too busy becoming a force they can't manipulate. Chaos didn't come to break you. It came to wake you. And now that you're awake, now that your eyes are open, now that you can see through the cracks in their carefully constructed illusions, the entire story changes. The roles shift. The power flips. They don't get to pull strings behind your back anymore, because you're no longer the quiet character in the corner. You're the one who steps into the room and senses everything, the tension, the intentions, the truth hiding behind every polite smile. Chaos has made you attentive, calculating, deliberate. It taught you to trust your instincts more than their explanations. It pushed you to question what you once accepted. It forced you to step into a version of yourself that doesn't rely on anyone's honesty to survive. And now, you're not just aware of the secret movements happening around you, you're prepared for them. Funny thing about rising, people think it's all applause, cheers, support, and smiling faces. They imagine everyone clapping as you climb, celebrating as you grow, admiring as you shine. But reality, reality has a much darker sense of humor, because the moment you start rising, really rising, the moment your footsteps get louder and your presence gets heavier, that's when you start seeing the truth. Not because they confess it. No, because your elevation pulls the masks right off their faces. You ever notice how people behave differently when they think you're staying exactly where you are? They're calm, comfortable, maybe even encouraging. As long as you don't threaten the quiet little world they've built, they don't mind your existence. But the moment your energy shifts, the moment your dreams grow too big for their comfort, the moment you aim higher than they expected, suddenly their eyes flicker, their tone changes, their smiles tighten, and you start hearing a truth that was always there, silent, but waiting for the right angle of light to be exposed. Your rise is that angle. Your ambition is that light. And your growth becomes the very thing that reveals what they never wanted you to see. You begin to notice who pretends to cheer for you but claps just a little too slowly. Who says, "I'm happy for you," with a voice that cracks under the weight of jealousy. Who disappears the moment your life starts moving in a direction they never imagined for you. You realize how many people loved the version of you that was struggling, uncertain, lost, because that version made them feel safe. It made them feel superior. It made them feel like they had time, control, or power. But the moment your spirit sharpens, the moment your confidence returns, the moment you rise like someone who's finally remembered their worth, that's when the hidden intentions start crawling out of the corners like roaches exposed by sudden light. Some of them will try to pull you back with softness, little doubts disguised as advice. Are you sure? Maybe take it slow. Don't get your hopes up. They'll speak with a gentle tone, but their words will drip with the fear of you becoming someone they can't predict anymore. Others will try to minimize your progress. It's not a big deal. Anyone could do that. You're overreacting. They want to shrink your achievements until you forget how impressive they really are. And then there are the quiet ones. The ones who vanish whenever you succeed. The ones who watch from afar, not out of admiration, but out of bitter disbelief. The ones who hoped you'd stay at the level where they could comfortably explain your failures, but now they can't explain your rise. Your success becomes a spotlight, not for you, for them. Their reactions tell you everything you need to know. Who's loyal, who's threatened, who's genuine, who's secretly been competing with you all along. Rising is the most honest X-ray you'll ever have of the people around you. But there's something beautifully twisted about this revelation. Because while you're climbing, while you're transforming, while you're stepping into the power you were always supposed to carry, you start feeling a strange freedom. You don't have to guess anymore. You don't have to trust blindly. You don't have to keep pretending you don't notice. Your rise forces the truth into the open. It gives you clarity sharper than any blade. You see who stands beside you and who just stands nearby. You see who lifts you with sincerity and who waits for the smallest crack to push you off balance. And the best part, you don't have to expose anyone. They expose themselves. All you have to do is continue rising, continue becoming, continue growing into a version of yourself that makes the insecure choke on their own envy. Your rise doesn't just change your world, it rearranges your relationships, your environment, your entire circle. The higher you go, the clearer your vision becomes. You see who's meant to go with you and who was only meant to be part of your story until you remembered who you are. You see who fears your potential because they know what you could become if you ever stop doubting yourself. And you see who quietly prays you make it, not because they need something from you, but because your victory inspires their own. The truth is simple. Your rise will expose every hidden intention around you, the good and the bad. It will show you who values you for real and who only valued the version of you that made them feel comfortable. It shows you who's threatened, who's loyal, who's pretending, who's waiting, who's fading, and who's silently rooting for you with a heart that understands your journey. Isn't it fascinating how the world only starts paying attention the moment you take up the space you were always afraid to claim? You spend years folding yourself smaller, tucking your voice behind your ribs, dimming your light so it doesn't blind anyone who prefers the comfort of shadows. You shrink because you're polite. You shrink because you're scared. You shrink because somewhere along the line, someone convinced you that being big, bold, loud, present was dangerous, that your power was too much, that your presence was inconvenient, that your dreams were unrealistic. So you made yourself tiny, hoping that maybe they'd love you more if you were less. But shrinking, oh, that's the quietest kind of self-destruction. Not dramatic, not noticeable, not explosive, just slow, painful, suffocating. A well-practiced smile, a soft apology, a step back, a nod of compliance, until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize the shape standing there. A silhouette of who you could have been, wrapped in the expectations of people who never planned to rise themselves. And then something happens. A spark. A whisper, a shift so subtle at first that you almost ignore it. But then it grows, louder, heavier, brighter. It pulls you up by the spine and asks you one simple question. Why are you playing small in a world that benefits from your silence? And suddenly, shrinking doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels insulting. It feels unnatural. It feels like betrayal. Not of other people, but of yourself. Because deep down, you know you were never meant to be average, never meant to blend in, never meant to tiptoe through life like a guest in your own story. No, you were built for more, crafted with intention, shaped with layers of grit, fire, wounds, strength, and something beautifully chaotic potential. The kind of potential that makes small minds nervous, because they can sense what you could become if you ever stop holding back. And here's the twist. The moment you stop shrinking, the world notices. Oh, they notice. The people who underestimated you suddenly squint, confused, maybe even startled. The ones who overlooked you tilt their heads, wondering how they missed the spark that was always there. The ones who tried to control you lose their grip, and the ones who feared your rise, they start to panic, because witnessing doesn't begin when you succeed. No, it begins the moment you stop apologizing for existing, When you take that first unapologetic step toward who you're meant to become, when you straighten your back, when your voice steadies, when your eyes stop avoiding the mirror, when you walk into a room without shrinking into the corners, when your energy changes, everything around you shifts along with it. People watch the transformation like an unfolding plot twist. The quiet one isn't so quiet anymore. The doubter isn't doubting. The invisible one starts shining in ways that demand attention. And the world loves a transformation. It's magnetic, unsettling, thrilling. They start observing you with a mix of curiosity, admiration, and fear. Because nothing is more unpredictable than someone who finally decides to stop hiding. You become a spectacle not because you're showing off, but because you're finally showing up. Your presence becomes louder than any words you could speak. Every step you take, every boundary you set, every dream you chase becomes a declaration of your rebirth. And they witness it, some proudly, some bitterly, some reluctantly. But they witness it all the same. And you start noticing something else too. The more you expand, the less room there is for the wrong people to stay close. You outgrow their expectations. You outgrow their limitations. You outgrow their comfort zones. The ones who only like the small version of you, they'll slip away. The ones who always believed in your spark, they'll draw closer. Rising becomes a filter, a cleaner, a revealer. And all you had to do to activate that truth was stop shrinking. The world can't witness someone who hides. There's nothing to see in someone who bends to every doubt, every fear, every criticism. But the moment you stop folding yourself into something small enough to fit inside their opinions, that's when the show begins. Your true size emerges. Your power radiates. Your potential breathes. And suddenly, every eye turns toward you not because you begged for attention, but because you finally stopped running from your own greatness. Witnessing begins the moment you decide that you're done playing small. When you claim your space. When you breathe fully. When you rise without waiting for permission. That's when the world watches you not as a shadow, but as a force.